Hello, and thanks for watching Focus, a show that focuses on community, unity, and service, featuring nonprofits and community heroes. I'm your host, Peter Talbot. Communities across the country are facing challenges bridging the learning gap, as many students lack internet access to complete school assignments and learn at their grade level. According to research, the homework gap is even more pronounced in minority communities. Our guest today is Malcolm Mitchell, an author, Super Bowl champion, and founder of the Share the Magic Foundation, whose mission is to unlock the potential of young lives through literacy. Malcolm, thank you so much for being here. This is truly an honor for me to have you here today.
Peter, it's a pleasure for me as well.
So, Malcolm, let's dive right in and we'll get into some of your history. University of Georgia,
That's right.
star athlete, went on to the Patriots.
Yes.
But let's talk about Share the Magic Foundation, because that really is, from what I've heard in the couple times I've heard you speak, it really is your passion. So talk a little bit about what made
Peter,
you...
can I clarify something really quick?
Sure.
I want to make sure that it's very clear that this green does not represent the Jets. That I'm a Patriot through and through. But you're absolutely right. I started Share the Magic Foundation in 2016. And it's really based on my personal experience. As a young kid growing up in Valdosta, Georgia, the thing that I loved to do more than anything else was play football. And I thought through football, I could make every dream come true. Once I got to the University of Georgia and I was placed in a different atmosphere, I was forced to challenge that perspective. And I realized if I fueled my brain as much as I was fueling my body, it would take me to similar places. So I set out to be a better reader in hopes to reach my maximum potential. And through the exposure through books, I realized that was possible. Now, what I love about the work I do at Cox today is that we are actually trying to create that same exposure through digital equity, making sure kids have access to the internet and understand how they can use it in a way to fuel their future.
So let's talk a little bit about that. And what are some of the challenges that students face when they don't have that access to the internet?
That's a great question. Back in 2021, when I was a senior in high school, the internet was more of a luxury. And I grew up in a low-income environment, so I didn't have access to that luxury, but it was no big deal. Everyone was still writing checks, everyone was still going to the bank, everyone was paying their rent at the local rent-paying location. But today, the internet is a necessity. And COVID-19 has proved that. In order for kids to have access to information, to be on an equal playing field with their peers, they need access to quality and affordable internet. And through that access to information, they'll have the resources they need to have opportunities, financial opportunities, and gain social mobility that allows them to advance and hopefully be in a position to help out their families someday.
Outstanding. You know, you talked about the partnership with Cox to help amplify the Connect to Compete. There's so many programs out there, the federal programs.
That's right.
So how is this making a difference in the communities that we talked about?
Well, I've had the privilege of traveling to different communities, especially with Cox, and talking about some of the challenges that they face with internet access. And you got to think of it this way. The internet is at a cost, right? And because it's at a cost, you have to pick between other things, such as either going to the gas station to get gas or going to the grocery store to get food. And what Cox is doing is they're coming into these communities and saying, we understand the challenges that you're facing. And through our Connect to Compete and our ACP programs, we want to address this problem and help any way possible to ensure that you and your family have equal opportunity to be on an equal playing field, so you're not left out of the things that society has to offer. And especially for children, they have the foundation they need to gain their academic prowess so they can compete in the real world.
So what are some of the ways that that you're trying to achieve your foundation's goals of increasing access to print, improving reading interest, and enhanced reading?
My foundation does that a few ways. We have programs, in-school programs that address book ownership. So kids in low-income environments don't have a plethora of access to print. So by ensuring and introducing books to kids, we kind of address that problem. Cox helps with that as well. Today we'll go to a Boys and Girls Club, and yesterday we're at a school where we do provide books for students. We also have digital platforms where educators can engage their students in reading-based activity, which goes hand in hand with having access to quality and affordable internet. And that's why this partnership with Cox means so much to me, because what we're doing is we're taking the necessity to read proficiently with the necessity of having quality and affordable internet and combining them, hopefully creating this burst of exposure that allow kids to see that they can go beyond their immediate circumstances.
So speaking of books, this is Malcolm's second book. His first is entitled The Magician's Hat, and this is, of course, my very favorite book in the whole wide world.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about being an author. What started you doing these books, and talk a little bit about both of them.
Peter, I grew up a struggling reader, and I know the consequences of low literacy. I have friends who gave up on life after football did not work out. I have friends who lost their life after football did not work out. And through reading, I learned you could be exposed to so many different things. And through that exposure, you realize there are other opportunities. And through the realization of other opportunities, you become inspired and you have hope. I learned that after I started reading. So when I thought of ways for me to impact communities, I really wanted to encourage kids to read, because I'm under the overwhelming conviction that you can read to a better future. So I started writing picture books to inspire kids to read. And I'm just so thankful that I have an organization like Cox that supports that effort, who kind of backs me in trying to get into communities and make sure that kids understand that they too can grow and excel. And providing those resources is a great way for us to create that foundation for them.
You know, it really is an incredible message, because then literacy becomes an avenue for these kids to advance and grow.
And, and the internet does as well. And that's why there's a lot of synergy and exposure through books and exposure through the internet, right? Now the internet, likewise with books, you have to learn how to use them. I know in the classrooms they say you start learning to read and then you read to learn. Well, the internet provides the same exposure opportunities if you know how to use it. And to me, they can work together to create robust exposure.
So how did you start on being an author? Obviously, you had the literacy and wanted to do some of that, but what made you say this is, because it's a great avenue.
Right.
You know, not every kid is going to have that sports option.
That's
you know,
right.
the basketball, football, where they have that ability to advance. But this is a way to advance, and I love your message surrounding that. But talk a little bit about being an author. Did you ever think as a kid you'd be an author someday?
No, I tell you what, it's a lot safer than running away from 300-pound men trying to tackle you. I didn't know it was a possibility. You know, I didn't see many authors that looked like me. So when it was time, or when I had the idea to write a book, I actually hesitated on several different occasions, not thinking it's something that I could really pull off. But again, through the power of reading, I realized that no, it is a possibility. And that sometimes you have to step outside of your comfort zone to accomplish your goals. And my only ambition was to inspire kids to read. And through that inspiration, I just pushed forward and decided to be an author. It's more challenging than one would think. I know the book doesn't have a lot of words, but that's actually the biggest challenge, trying to tell an impactful story with limited words.
It's great. I enjoyed it.
Thank you.
It is a quick read.
Thank you.
Yes. So let's take you back to as a kid growing up, as you said, in Valdosta, and talk a little bit about the struggles you had. Yeah. Especially in school,
Right.
and then you ended up at the University of Georgia, so
Right.
A great institution. So talk a little bit about that transformation and how you got there.
Let me explain Valdosta, and I think that'll help lay the framework. 2009, ESPN hosted a competition. It was a nationwide competition, national competition, and it was titled, I think it was titled Titletown USA.
Yes.
And it was trying to find the winningest programs in the country. And the categories were high school, collegiate, and professional teams. Now, my high school, Valdosta High School, was in the mix with the Chicago Bulls during the Michael Jordan era, the New England Patriots during Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, right? You got to think of the 49ers, the Dallas Cowboys. You name any great program, we were in the mix with them, and Valdosta High School won the competition.
Wow.
So we are the winningest high school football program in the country. So it's easy to understand how, as a child growing up in that environment, that I gravitated towards playing football. The consequence is I didn't fully understand the importance of an education. Because in my community, there were no tangible examples of education taking you anywhere. You didn't walk outside and see professionals like yourself. You didn't see doctors. You didn't see lawyers. So I was under the conviction that football was it. It was the greatest thing, and it was the only thing. Yeah. And I did enough to get it to the University of Georgia. Athletes don't have to have a 4.0. So I got to the University of Georgia, and it was the exact opposite from my neighborhood. Majority of the students were there trying to accomplish or acquire an education so they can advance in society. And I realized that's something that I never even thought about. So I explored and wanted to figure out why was it so important. And I realized that my mom told me this quote, and it's, football is great, right? But you have a choice. Being the best football player you can be and being the best person you can be. And being the best person lasts a lot longer. And I realized focusing on your academics and your education led towards being that better person. So I wanted to chase after that as well.
That's outstanding. Yeah. What is it? Obviously, there's something special in you that that sparked that change. Yeah. But is there something that we can do with today's youth that gives them that same spark that you found? You had the football aspect, but it wasn't enough for you, and you understood the importance of literacy. So how do we kind of effectuate that change in today's youth?
I've never walked into a building or classroom and asked the question, who wants to be a failure? And people raise their hand. I've never walked in a building or a classroom and said, who wants to go to jail? And people raise their hand. I've never walked into a building or classroom and asked the question, who wants to be on a government assistant programs? And people raise their hand. So that tells me immediately that everybody wants to strive for some level of success, however they define that. The question is, how do you get there?
Yeah.
And that becomes the biggest challenge. I'll give you another example. When I was a kid, my teacher told me to read to get an A in class. Well, they assumed that I cared about getting an A in class. My teacher told me to read to pass and go to the next grade level. They made the assumption that I cared about going to the next grade level. It's when I realized that reading led to more financial opportunities that it took on a different meaning, because that meant I could be in a position to make sure my mom did not have to work 3 jobs her whole life. Now, once I figured that out, I would do anything to acquire the ability to read proficiently. right? So I think to answer your question is, coming in with relevant messaging that connects to the community is a great way to foster or create that spark. And that's why I think the internet is such an important tool, because it can be something that exposes a child to that realization that creates that spark, just like reading can do that as well.
So you talked about working with your partnership that you have with Cox and promoting kind of the internet and some of the Connect to Compete and some of the other programs. You were out in Rhode Island. You're going to be, and I can't wait to see you with the kids today at the Meriden Boys and Girls Club. Talk about a little bit about your partnership, and are there other things that you're doing with Cox?
Of course. In 2021, we decided to come together and create this partnership to expose kids to more opportunities and get them to understand the opportunity of having, access to the internet. Also, we really wanted to communicate with communities and make them aware of these resources that were out there, like Connect to Compete in the ACP program that grants families the opportunity to have quality and affordable internet access. And through that, they can be on that equal playing field with the rest of the world, or people who have the ability to have access to those resources. And we continue to go out into the markets to talk to kids, talk about the innovation labs that are being created in Boys and Girls Club to make sure that they have a safe place to have access to the internet. We are talking about some projects for next year that I'll hold off on saying.
Okay.
But I am looking forward, because we're getting a bit creative and finding ways to make that relevant connection into communities. But what we strive to do is expose families and communities to these affordable internet offerings, but also inspire kids to, really use them in a way that allows them to progress in our society.
Excellent. So we've got about 10 minutes or so left, and I would be remiss if I didn't talk about your football career. We talked about Valdosta High School and what they achieved. All of us are familiar with the University of Georgia and what happens there, but I want to talk to, you're in New England, so you have to talk Patriots. So, and I jotted these down because the stats are amazing. On February 5th, 2017, you played in Super Bowl 51. In that game, you caught a total of 5 passes for 70 yards, and 6 passes for 70 yards. Don't let me short you. And 5 of those were receptions that came in the 4th quarter of the game. 5 of the 6 passes you caught from Brady were in the 4th quarter of what was arguably the most exciting 4th quarter in Super Bowl history. 4 of the receptions you caught went for first downs. So you're in this pressure-packed 4th quarter of Super Bowl 51, and you step up and shine. Talk a little bit about what's going on mentally and everything else as that 4th quarter plays out for you.
Oh, man. We were getting beat so bad that I stopped thinking about winning the game and focused more on ensuring that I did everything in my power just to perform to the best of my ability, right? I didn't want to walk away from that game giving up. I really want to walk away from that game saying, listen, we put our best foot forward. Now, the outcome just happened to work in our favor. And it's really when Dante Hightower had the strip sack that the whole sideline realized the opportunity that was right in front of us. That if we could find a way to be perfect, for one more quarter, we could pull off one of the most amazing things in sports history. Now, that wasn't the mentality of the whole game. In fact, leading up into the game, Bill Belichick did a great job of preparing us. He told us that it's like playing 2 games because halftime is extended, right? You have the halftime show that makes the Super Bowl halftime longer than regular season game halftimes. Right. So we understood that that was enough time for momentum to shift, for a team to get hot or a team to get cold. But when we came out of halftime and the Falcons scored another touchdown, that put us down 28-3, we knew we had to do something. We didn't know when the opportunity would come, but we were hopeful. And I would say Bill did a great job of preparing us to recognize when the opportunity existed and not let off the gas. You know what? I mean, to think about it, I'm not sure it'll ever happen again.
Yeah.
Right? We had 2 two-point conversions that were absolutely necessary. We had 3 or 4 fourth down conversions, and that just doesn't happen in football games.
Yeah. Regular season games,
that just doesn't
let alone Super Bowl games.
That just does not happen.
So you're trailing 21-3 at halftime.
Yes.
You're a rookie. You go into halftime. What's halftime like in the New England Patriots locker room, trailing by 18 in a Super Bowl?
First off, I went in there feeling like Charlie Brown when he's standing outside getting rained on without an umbrella, right? And I'm the rookie, so I'm looking around at all the veteran players trying to figure out how they feel about what's taking place. This is my first time in the atmosphere. I look at Tom, and he was kind of sitting there with his head down, and I couldn't tell if he was trying to get in the zone or if he was sad. So I stopped looking at him. That wasn't, that wasn't the right. That wasn't the right place to turn my attention. Then I watched Julian, and he's running up and down the locker room screaming something that I didn't understand. There are defensive players kind of doing their own thing, huddled up. But I'll tell you this story. After the coaches meeting, Bill comes out, and he gets the team huddled up. And I'm thinking to myself, here's the Al Pacino any given Sunday speech that's going to electrify the team and get us to run through a brick wall. Here's the Vince Lombardi moment. He stood in front of that team, and I sat up in my chair and I leaned in because I needed it. I needed the encouragement. And I thought to myself, boy, here we go. He's about to rally the troops. He looks at us, and this is verbatim. Peter, he says, guys, if we play better, we'll win. And he walks out the room. That's it. That's all he said. And I looked around the room thinking, okay, is someone going to add to this? Because that's not really what we need to hear. The truth is, we made a halftime adjustment, and we went from calling zone beater plays to man beater plays because the Falcons had switched their defensive game plan on us at the last minute. So we adjusted for that, and sure enough, Bill was right. We played better, so we won.
In one of, like I said earlier, in one of the most exciting, arguably the most exciting Super Bowl in history. So Belichick is such an icon. Do you consider Bill Belichick to be the greatest football coach of all time? And I know there's cases that can be made for a lot of others, but truth be told, I am not a Patriots fan. I'm a Giants fan. I respect the Patriots. Yeah. And I respect Belichick for what he has done.
Now, why didn't you tell me at the beginning of that?
Because I wanted this to be a friendly conversation.
Bill Belichick is the best coach I ever played for. But he was more than that for me. I grew up in a single-parent household. And my father was not in my life, so I got a lot of my structure from sport. Accountability, responsibility, determination, effort, teamwork, resiliency, right? And when I got to the Patriots, Bill forced this high level of accountability on the players that forced me to mature as a man, as a human being, as a person. I was either going to rise to the occasion and be more responsible and take accountability for my actions, or I would not be on the team. And him forcing me to do that helped me mature as an individual. So, I haven't seen him since I left the team, but if I ever got an opportunity to look him in the eyes again, I'd tell him thank you, not for drafting me, not for coaching me, but thank you for helping me grow as a person. So in my eyes, there would be no better coach than Bill Belichick.
It's a great point, Malcolm, that you talk about having the mentorship, and I hope I'm not stealing some of your thunder. You alluded to something that's coming, but is there an opportunity for Cox and other companies that are like-minded, that want to give back to their communities, to do some sort of mentorship with youth today that gives them that Bill Belichick type person, maybe that doesn't connect on that level, but it's, that gives them someone to look up to, someone to idolize, someone to follow, someone that will guide them down the right path?
I can't speak for every organization because I don't know every organization. I can speak for Cox because when they approached me with this partnership, I asked a lot of questions. I was very curious because I was a kid who grew up with minimal resources. And I had a lot of companies come in briefly and then leave, right? Almost creating more problems than they fixed.
Yeah.
Cox is trying to accomplish exactly what you're talking about. They are saying we understand some of the challenges that communities face. Not only do we want to address that through our affordable internet offerings, but we want to be there consistently over a long period of time to ensure that we can continue to learn more and adapt to the challenges you face. And that's why I love this partnership. They allow me to get out in the community, share my passion, and hopefully be for kids what Bill Belichick was for me. Someone who says, I understand, but we can do this. And let's not give up.
And the final question that we always ask our guests, Malcolm, is that after everything that we've been through as a humanity and as a country these past years, what is the one thing that you're most grateful for?
Man. I have a fiance and I have a 2-year-old son. I think about what my life could have been. And it was so simple for me to fall into the categories of some of my peers. But there's one person who ensured that never took place, and that's my mother.
And Malcolm, that's the final word. Thank you so much. And thanks for watching Focus.